Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You'll excuse the fact that I'm out of breath, but President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The president was shot in the head. Connally was shot in the chest.
The year 1963 was pivotal in the political career of Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States. His opponent in the elections a year later would be Republican Senator Barry Goldwater from Arizona. Kennedy believed that if he defeated him by a landslide, he would have the power to get any reform legislation he wanted through Congress. At the end of 1963, however, he faced a major problem that could prevent the realization of this plan. In Texas, a conflict had erupted between Governor John Connally and Senator Ralph Yarborough, both Democrats. This rivalry was becoming more and more pronounced every day. The smart move was to present a united front to the voters. In the end, Kennedy decided to organize a tour of the state, taking both politicians with him. Throughout October, preparations were made, and local news agencies reported almost daily that President Kennedy was coming to Dallas. Finally, on November 22, 1963, the presidential delegation took off from Carswell Air Force Base and landed in Dallas after a 13-minute flight. According to the schedule, Kennedy was scheduled to meet with several prominent businessmen at the Dallas Trade Mart in the afternoon. But so intense was the interest in the president at the airport that the motorcade that was to take him to the Dallas Trade Mart left 15 minutes after the scheduled departure time. At 12:30 p.m., the 1961 Lincoln convertible limousine carrying Kennedy turned off Houston Street onto Elm Street. When the motorcade entered Dealey Plaza Park, it was greeted with intense enthusiasm. In addition to Kennedy, First Lady Jacqueline, Texas Governor John Connally, and the governor's wife Merrill were in the vehicle, with Secret Service agent William Quarrier in the driver's seat and Agent Raul Callan sitting next to him. The other two vehicles in the motorcade, Ford and Cadillac, carried Secret Service agents and local police officers. As the motorcade pulled into Dealey Plaza Park, Nellie Connally turned to Kennedy, who was sitting behind her, smiled and said, "Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." Kennedy turned to the governor's wife for a moment as he greeted the people who had greeted him so enthusiastically and said, "No, you really can't." Those were Kennedy's last words. A few seconds later, gunshots were heard one after the other. 80% of eyewitnesses reported hearing 3 gunshots. However, the reports of the committee formed after the incident suggested that 2 shots may have been fired during the assassination. According to these reports, Kennedy was hit by 2 bullets, one in the head and one in the neck. The bullet that hit the neck exited just below the president's larynx. It entered the governor's back near his right armpit, tore through his rib cage, and exited under his right nipple. The other bullet that hit Kennedy in the head shattered the skull and entered the brain. It was this second bullet that was fatal. The sniper attack took place from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Warehouse, located at the entrance to Elm Street. An Italian-made Mannlicher Carcano rifle with a scope was used in the attack. According to the investigative reports of the committees established, there were 5.5 seconds between the first and the last shot. In the same reports, it was stated that the weapon used was last produced in 1945, and that it was not possible to fire 3 shots in this time with such a weapon, which works with a lever mechanism in which the bullets are fed one by one into the chamber. The moment was shocking for everyone there. Associated Press photographer Ike Altgens describes the moment as follows: "Everyone was frozen or lying on the ground. No one was moving. I took another picture. At this point, the cops headed toward the green area north of Elm Street. I followed them. I thought they were going to catch the man who shot the president. I wanted to take a picture of the man." The reason why the police headed to this area was because local patrol officer Joe Smith had shouted that they were shooting from behind the bushes, was the only one who kept his cool during the incident and realized that the gunshots were coming from the book depository of the school in Texas. That person was police officer Marion Baker. She ran into the building and started checking for anything suspicious. The activity outside was reflected inside the building. Staff were frantically trying to understand what was going on outside. When Baker reached the second floor, a man walked past him. He would later recall that the man looked quite calm, walking at a normal pace and holding a can of Coke in his right hand. Baker did not suspect this man at the time, but in a few hours, he would learn that this was Lee Harvey Oswald, the man arrested for the murder of the President of the United States. About 3 minutes after the last shot at 12:35 p.m., Oswald walked out the front door of the Texas School Book Depository and disappeared into the crowd. Shortly afterward, the building was sealed. After a search at 1322, a rifle was found hidden among several boxes on the 6th floor of the building. Marion Baker was right. The gun had been fired from the school book depository in Texas, but Baker's intuition was no longer helping her catch the assassin. Following the attack, the vehicle carrying Kennedy quickly headed to nearby Parkland Memorial Hospital. Kennedy had died during the assassination. His death was officially announced at 1 p.m., half an hour after the incident. Governor Connally was alive, although seriously wounded. And after a while, he would recover.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
"45 minutes after the assassination, the Dallas Police Department announced that police officer J.D. Tippit, who was near the assassination site, had been killed by gunfire. Within an hour, 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald was in custody on suspicion of murder. Witness testimony and the fact that he had been seen earlier in the day in a Texas school book depository made Oswald the prime suspect in the Kennedy assassination. Oswald was a former sailor in the U.S. Navy. After his military adventure, he defected to the Soviet Union. He was a self-described communist. After living in the Soviet Union for many years, he returned and settled in Dallas. He had the right profile to be a hitman. But the American Secret Service would not have enough evidence or time to investigate the assassination. Two days later, Oswald was murdered in the basement of the Dallas police station by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub operator, while the television networks were broadcasting. Ruby, arrested for Oswald's murder, died in 1967 while awaiting a new trial. The official explanation was that Ruby died of cancer. Evidence of the assassination was disappearing fast. After Kennedy's assassination, Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson became the 36th President of the United States. The commissions he set up concluded that Oswald had carried out the assassination alone. There was no conspiracy, but the majority of U.S. citizens were not convinced by these conclusions. According to a 2014 poll, 80% of U.S. citizens still believe that Kennedy was killed as a result of a conspiracy. The Kennedy assassination was one of the most dramatic events in recent American history. Soon there were many conspiracy theories about the assassination. District Attorney Jim Garrison claimed that President Kennedy was killed in a joint operation between the Pentagon, the FBI, and covert operations units. But he was forced to release each of the defendants he had taken into custody for lack of evidence. According to reports prepared by the Soviet Union's intelligence service, the KGB, the assassination was personally instigated by Vice President Lyndon Johnson. Before the assassination, Johnson's bank accounts were examined under two separate investigations. The first was a congressional investigation by a Senate committee, alleging that Johnson had taken bribes. The other was a report by Life magazine, one of America's leading magazines. Life published a series of articles on how someone with a known salary could have such a large fortune. When Kennedy was assassinated, these investigations were halted and the allegations were covered up. There were other reasons why suspicion about the Kennedy assassination centered on Lyndon Johnson. He had ordered the Lincoln car in which Kennedy was shot to be cleaned while it was still parked at the hospital. This destroyed the evidence in the back seat of the car before it could be examined. In 2017, according to National Archive documents released with the approval of U.S. President Trump, the FBI received intelligence that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to be murdered, but took no action to prevent it. But Johnson was not the only suspect. Kennedy's political opposition to the Israeli nuclear program led to theories that the assassination was orchestrated by the Israeli Secret Service Mossad. There have also been dozens of control theories about the assassination, involving many individuals and institutions such as the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. military, Cuban President Fidel Castro, the KGB, and other organizations around the world. But no matter what, the Kennedy assassination remains unsolved to this day. The allegations have been nothing more than theories. To this day, it remains one of the greatest enigmas in the history of the United States of America, and will remain so for many years to come. If you want this series to continue, like and subscribe to the video. We are waiting for your suggestions for the assassinations we will tell in future videos. We have identified a few names, but our priority will be the topics you want.